Today I'm going to take this cheap neck that I bought off of Amazon, and I'm going to do all of the steps necessary to bring it up to a higher level of finish so that it feels like a custom handmade piece for the guitar that I am bolting it to. The first step is going to be to disassemble this guitar that it's stuck on, so let's get started. If you saw the first video in this series, you will recognize that this is my guitar that I've called the Instigator, which is the first guitar that I've really fully designed from the ground up and templated so that I can make copies of it. As I take off the pickguard, you'll notice that all of the electronics are on the pickguard and nothing has to be wired through the body. That was part of the design philosophy that's going to get modified a bit in this redesign, but let's get this neck off and worry about that first. Now looking at it here, you can really see how I've taken that Fender design style of making something easier to make on a production line, and I've upped the game a little bit with it. This is really made of three pieces. We've got a pickguard assembly, which is completely self-contained. It does not require any wiring through the body. We've got, of course, the body assembly, finished wood pieces with the bridge attached, strap buttons, call out a day, and then we've got the neck. It is three simple assemblies that can be bolted together relatively quickly, while still maintaining a unique design and some specialized features. All right, so ideally, I would get all of the woodwork on the white wood here done before I do the finish work, and then move on to the fretwork after that. And I have drilled out the tuner holes that I had put in here previously to a larger size for the new tuners that are going in it. When I first designed this guitar, I wanted the reverse headstock, and the quickest and simplest way to get some tuners on it was to buy a 12-string set of tuners and just use the bottom side of the headstock set of 6 tuners to do that. I have this time bought myself some actual nicer tuners. They're some Geiger locking tuners. They're not insanely expensive, but they are like 30 bucks a set for some decent locking tuners, and they take a little bit more like a 3/8 inch hole. So I drilled that all out, and now I want to roll the fretboard edges before I move on. I've bought 3 of these Amazon necks now, and the biggest complaint I have about them is quality control, because they are varying levels of quality. This is one of the better ones that I've gotten, although I've been able to get all of them up to the same level. It's just a matter of how much work it takes to get there. Now, my biggest complaint on the design of these necks is that the fretboard edges have quite a sharp angle on them, and that's a simple fix. See, all we're going to do is take a regular screwdriver and we're going to kind of burnish the edges. This is a trick I actually picked up from a Rhett Shull video, and it is a quick and easy way to get a more comfortable feel on a guitar neck, get a little bit more broken in, vintagey kind of feel on it, as you'll have a more rounded over fretboard edge when you're playing. Now, really, any sort of steel bar of any sort will do the job of burnishing here, but of course a screwdriver is something that most of us are going to have. Now, you could do this with sandpaper. You could do this with several different kinds of tools. The reason why I like using the screwdriver so much is because it gives you just the right amount of control. As you can see, you can do a couple of passes and get it right, and you get that little bit of tweakability where you can kind of stop where you want to. A lot of tools are going to be a lot more aggressive than this, and if you go too far, you're going to have to do some extra work with the frets and rounding over the rest of the stuff to make up for it if you haven't actually gone too far to make it unfixable. This really gives you a good fine amount of control without making it take forever to do. Real time, this process is taking me all of like 4 or 5 minutes, if that. It's not like I set a timer. I suppose once I'm done with this and I'm in post-production, I can actually check the video clip and see how long this took me, So it took me this long to do this process. And if you want to do this to any of your guitars, give it a little bit more of a worn-in edge. You can do this to your guitar neck while it is still on the guitar. I'm just taking the opportunity while I'm doing all the rest of the woodwork to do it now. Then I'm just going to go back through. I'm going to close my eyes and feel these fretboard edges so that my eyes don't try to lie to me and say that, oh, it's just as smooth as any other part. Like, your hands can tell a little bit better. And this first fret, it's been a little bit more stubborn than the rest for me. So I'm going to give it another once over, and then we're going to move on to sanding and finishing. All right, now for finishing, I don't want to spend a ton of money trying to find another kind of finish to experiment with this time. And so I'm going to utilize some of the True Oil that I have left over from when I did a guitar body with a True Oil finish a few years ago.
Quick edit. Just wanted to mention that I actually couldn't find that True Oil bottle that I had sitting around from last time. But the cool thing about True Oil is that it is readily available. And so I am in the Walmart parking lot getting myself another bottle. This little 3-ounce bottle came to like $9. You can get a better deal on Amazon, but if for some reason that's not accessible to you, or you don't want to support Amazon or anything like that, you can just pick up Gunstock oil at the Walmart.
I only plan on doing probably 2 or 3 coats of True Oil on this because I do like a bare neck. I do like a relatively unfinished neck myself, and I had left this in raw wood for myself because over years and years of playing, just like the oils from my hand will break it in well enough, and I know personally I'm not going to put it in too many horrible humidity changes that it would be susceptible to problems. But as this guitar is going to somebody else, I want to make sure it's got some sort of a finish on it while maintaining that mildly unfinished feel. So minimal coats of True Oil on here, and then we're going to try to sand it to like a satin finish for speed. Hey, it looks like most of the people who watch my videos aren't subscribed yet. So if you like what you're seeing, especially if this is the second or third time that you've found yourself watching a junk music video, why not drop me a like, a subscribe, and in exchange for that, maybe I'll get enough dopamine to keep myself motivated and keep making these oddball instruments and videos about them to show to you. If you're trying to find new ways to build or modify your guitars, your basses, your dulcimers, your amps, your whatever, hit that notification bell. And thanks for stopping by. All right, so after the finishing, this neck is feeling awesome. Let me run you through the steps of everything that I did to actually do the finishing process on this neck. I started by sanding the whole thing with 150 grit sandpaper, the whole back of the neck, the headstock, and everything but the fingerboard. And then I went back through and I sanded everything with a 220 to follow that up. Got everything pretty smooth with 220 grit. And then I started with my first coat of True Oil and I let that dry overnight. Now with any finish, there's going to be a possibility that the moisture in the finish raises the grain a little bit on you. So I went back over the next day with 220 grit sandpaper again before putting the second coat of True Oil on. And I let this, like the last one, dry overnight. I let every coat of True Oil dry overnight. After that second coat, when I came back the next day, I sanded to 400 grit. At this point, I no longer was sanding the headstock. I want to get a satin finish on the back of the neck, and I want to get a gloss finish on the headstock. So I stopped sanding the headstock at this point. I let it start building up coats of True Oil, whereas the back of the neck, I was sanding it back a little bit each time to try to keep that flat satin finish happening. So we sanded to 400, third coat of True Oil at that point. The next day I sanded lightly at 400 again. I didn't really dig into it too much before putting on that fourth coat of True Oil. I sanded the neck one more time with a 400 grit and then I put on the fifth coat of True Oil. Now at this point I had more of a process written out and planned, but the headstock was looking nice and glossy. The back of the neck was sealed, but still felt kind of like raw sanded wood, which is what I prefer. So it was protected, but it was nice and satin smooth. So I stopped there. The next thing that I started working on was installing the tuners. Now, when I drilled out these tuner holes, I drilled them out just a little bit undersized so that I'd have a nice snug fit, and I used a clamp to press these tuners into place. If you're doing this with locking tuners, you're going to want to remove this spindle piece from it because it is too thin and too weak to support the pressure from the clamp you're going to use. So I just used the casing of the tuner itself rather than the spindle there. And I'll put those back in after I'm done. Now, here's where my first big problem in this build arose. I did plan on undersizing these holes, but apparently it was just a little bit too undersized. When I put in this last tuner, it actually cracked the headstock just a little bit, and it's not going to be a major repair, but it does now kind of hang up the project on me. Now I have to wait for this glue to dry, and I will have to go back in with a file or something to resize those holes just a little bit larger so that I don't re-crack this headstock again. And in the meantime, I'm going to have to set this aside and work on the body of this guitar a little bit. But that's all for a different video. Through the magic of the internet, I will move straight through this video to after the repairs. So now that the headstock is repaired, now that the tuners are in place, the next thing that I'm going to do would be fretwork most likely, but in this case I've already done the fretwork on this neck the last time that I bolted it to a guitar, so there's not much to show you here. There's a lot of more talented people than me doing fretwork on the internet anyway. It's not a hard subject to find videos on if you're interested in that part. The last thing that I'm going to do to this neck for now is I'm going to go over the entire fretboard and all the frets with a very fine steel wool, and I'm going to do all of that fine finish sanding in that way, and then I'm going to go back in and I'm going to use lemon oil to coat and protect the fretboard. And that's going to be our neck finish for now. The next steps are going to involve finishing the body of this guitar, and I'm working on a little bit of the tidy up woodwork involved in this. There is not a lot for me to show of that. I basically broke out this weird route into a swimming pool route. I'm still in the middle of that as of this video. I'm plugging the old post holes from the bridge, and I'm going to re-drill new ones that just fit a little bit better. I'm going to put a side jack in this, and then it's going to be ready for finish, at which point I will be picking up the next video. We're going to finish this body with a different product than the neck. Stop by if you want to see that. I should have it out within the month, and then I've got to start digging into the electronics on this thing. Hopefully you'll join me.